But behind closed doors, I think you likely get a different answer on exactly how they feel about all of that. I think so. So Parliament is prorogued. We've got to pause here until March 24th. There's going to be a Liberal leadership race. Who are the options? Now, I don't blame the Liberals for shutting down Parliament, for pausing government. It happened before with them, but I think that any political party would use whatever tools and even stretch whatever tools they have legally to serve their interests, which is certainly what's happening here. The Liberal Party is in shambles. They don't have a true leader. And if there were an election today, well, they'd be even more screwed than they likely already are, regardless. Political parties will do this kind of meddling to serve their own interests. Conservatives would do it. The NDP would do it. We've seen them do it. No real qualms there when you look at it from a realistic perspective. What's interesting to me is who's going to be the next Liberal leader. I say this all the time, and a lot of you disagree with me. I've heard a lot of you say this is something that I don't see eye to eye with you, Russ. I am cheering with all my heart's content for the Liberals to be as strong as they possibly can as a political party. I'm cheering for the Bloc Québécois, the NDP. I'm cheering for the Conservatives. I'm cheering for the People's Party of Canada. I want all of these parties to do their absolute best to come up with platforms, come up with ideas that will convince Canadians to vote for them. More competition in any respect results in better outcomes for the consumer, right? In this case, it's me and you, people who are voting, people who are living here in Canada. When more parties are strong and when there are more better options, I think ultimately you get the best case scenario, right? So I want the Liberals to be strong, just like I want every other party to be strong, just like I want the Conservatives to be strong. I hope for a strong party, but in my eyes, none of the clear options fit the ticket for this Liberal leadership. We've got Freeland, I think is too associated with Trudeau. I think many people will associate her too heavily with Trudeau. I don't think that her letter disowning the Prime Minister will be enough to disassociate her. Even if she was the reason that Trudeau is stepping down, I don't think that that's quite enough to distance herself from a population that has largely decided we don't like what's happened over the past 9 years. We want something else. I think she's too associated with the old guard, the people who have been here. Now, Mark Carney could very well win the Liberal leadership race. But again, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. You might not know this about me. I have a certain worldview that's developed as I've followed politics, as I've studied this over the past number of years, making videos on it. I don't think that the ultimate power in the world is centralized in a given government or a specific leader. I think that there are issues with global organizations that make decisions that other countries are beholden to without being in elected positions. We know all humans are corruptible, and I think that the more and more power that is centralized into global organizations and the more and more sway that they have over countries and over the actions of different institutions in those countries, well, the more susceptible it is to centralized takeover, centralized control to serve the interests of somebody other than the actual citizens of the country. That's the world I think we live in today with these global organizations of central banks, Bank of International Settlements, IMF. We have these bankers that get together and they decide, hey, we're in a safe space. Let's talk about how we can handle this in each of our economies, which seems reasonable. Learn from each other as a global organization of people who are in similar roles in different countries. Yes, that makes sense in principle. But when you have these people coming together, making decisions about the way that they're going to operate, and they're not elected and they're not required to give you any information about what they're doing, I think that's a problem. And that's what I try to elaborate on in much of the videos on this channel and make clear to people how much power and how many decisions are being made outside of the realm of what they would want you to believe is politics. These precise mathematician costumes that they're wearing. It's not true. These are people who are choosing winners in the economy, choosing losers in the economy, choosing winners in the world, choosing losers in the world, and are impacting your ability to get ahead as a person. And I think that there's not much more politically important than those topics. the reason I bring this up is that there is no leader that is talking like that, really. No feasible leader for the next election. Carney is the personification of these concerns. We've got somebody who has got lots of connections in this global financial community, jumping from consultant job to investment firm to central banker here, central banker there. Clearly, this is somebody that has trust of that global community. Could that be used to help Canada? He'll certainly make the case that it is. My connections will help us lead us to a strong economy. I'm sure will be something that he'll say if he runs for leadership. But it doesn't do anything to alleviate my concerns about having more and more big decisions being made by fewer and fewer people behind more and more closed doors. Now we've got people like Dominic LeBlanc, Mark Miller, Champagne, these liberal people who have been around for quite some time who may have leadership aspirations. I just don't think you can separate it far enough from Trudeau to get people to vote for them. Can you credibly make new policy ideas that will resonate with Canadians without simultaneously getting accused of, well, while you were in power for 9 years, how come you didn't bring this up at the time? Did you always not agree with Trudeau? Or are you just saying this now to try to get votes from other people to win this leadership race? I think that a lot of the people associated with this government over the past while, they're not going to be solid options. But at the same time, I don't think that Pierre Poilievre talks about this in the right way either. He talks about how money printing is an issue. He's talked about central banking. In 2021, he talked a lot about this as well, has kind of slowed down his rhetoric on it as of late. But he doesn't talk about how we could get out of this situation where there's more people making decisions behind the scenes that are impacting everyday Canadians. He says, money printing bad, it was Justin Trudeau's fault. It was their liberal spending that caused us to print money. I believe more so that it was a belief that trust in the major Western institutions and trust in them operating how they are operating, that is what really led to the money printing in my eyes. We saw central banks around the world print billions and billions of dollars per week all throughout the pandemic to prop up the economy. That might have been a good thing. That might have kept workers and employees connected to their jobs so that we didn't have as high unemployment numbers. Could have propped up the economy, but we also saw the downside of it. We saw the upside for some people: asset price inflation, real estate going through the roof, crypto going through the roof, stocks. When you add more money to the system, the things that are measured in that money go up because each individual dollar is worth less, right? I don't think that this was all because of Trudeau's spending when it comes to the CERB and the CRB and the emergency wage subsidies. I don't think that this certainly is connected to it, but I do believe that our connection to this organization of central banks globally led us down this path of zero interest rate monetary policy, a quantitative easing, money made for these big banks as they trade settlement balances to own more Government of Canada bonds. These are details we've talked about on the channel before. Nobody's talking about it at that level. Poilievre either. Although we do have some information about what Poilievre thinks. This is something that's been talked about ad nauseum over the past 4 days. I haven't given my take on it yet. We've got a 2-hour interview between Jordan Peterson and Pierre Poilievre. Some good points made in there, some not so good points made. But the way that he talks about money printing, he doesn't give any kind of, here's what I would have done in this situation. Here's how I could have led us better than Trudeau could have. Here's how I'm going to push back against the interests of these global organizations to actually serve the interests of us here at home nationally as Canadians. Let's listen to this clip from the interview here. I think you're going to find it interesting. I sure did, but I do have some problems with it.
Okay, so what would you do to stop inflation?
Well, we stop the money printing. You know, we need, and the money printing is just a means to fund deficit spending. Mm-hmm. Governments borrow to
define the deficit, for people.
So basically, the deficit is the.
So I think that this is an oversimplification of why we printed money during the pandemic and for America during the Great Financial Crisis. I don't think money was only printed for because governments wanted money to take on debt to provide these social programs. Also, when you print money, you increase demand in the bond market. That certainly allows the government to take on more debt. But what you're doing is stimulating the economy. You're bringing down interest rates, and that allows more businesses to expand more quickly. It allows for consumers to feel better about their finances and go out and spend and take on cheap debt. Well, everybody did that in Canada. Because they made you feel like, hey, if you're not doing this, you're the schmuck, right? Because we're going to inflate away everybody's debt. I don't think that it's all just because the government wants money to implement social programs. I also think that the central bankers were like, hey, we need to stimulate the economy here. We've got to close down the economy. This was their idea. So we need to stimulate it. We can't just allow a recession to happen. When I think that there's arguments to be made that, one, the economy shouldn't have been shut down to the extent that it was. That could have helped us. And two, just this thought that we cannot let anything negative happen to the economy. We cannot allow these big banks to experience any kind of stress. We cannot let people who have taken on too much debt and now are losing their jobs, we can't let them lose their homes. It would look too bad on us. I think that there's an argument to be made that more of a free market with less intervention from the central banks may have led to better outcomes for Canadians, because we wouldn't have seen asset price inflation, all of these social issues popping up in terms of housing and people not being able to start families. I think a lot of this is the result of the decisions made by central banks, not necessarily individual governments who kind of were along for the ride when it comes to this global money printing that we saw.
Difference between what the government spends and what it brings in.